Suit up, strap in, warm the tires, and leave on yellow. Time for the MitsuTimes podcast, presented by MitsuTimes.org, the home of the fastest Mitsubishi cars. With your host, Josh.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Josh with MitsuTimes. Today, our special guest is another Josh. This one is Josh Redden, the sales manager at Haltech. How are you today, Josh?
I'm good, Josh. How you doing, man?
I'm great. It feels weird to say that, but it feels like everywhere I've been going to all these events and races and stuff, I keep seeing you and your posse out there.
Yeah, man, we travel around a lot. We try to get out to as many races and events as we can get out to support our products and all of our customers and friends. So Definitely. We travel a lot.
That's killer. To see, at that car show down in Florida, I mean, was maybe I could count all the race cars on one hand. So to see you guys out there and promoting your products and getting people to kind of perk up and go, oh, okay, yeah, they offer this for my car. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a good meet too. Actually, we had quite a few Haltech cars and customers and friends that were there, and getting out and being part of the community has always been a big thing for me, especially when it comes to the Mitsubishi stuff. So.
Yeah, but my God, was it hot. Jeez.
Yes, it was.
I think I'll stay in Kentucky from now on. So let's talk about the origins of Haltech. How, when, and why did it get started?
Well, Haltech's actually been around since 1986. We started with Steve Mitchell. He was a bit of a car guy and a computer whiz, and he developed a computerized diagnostic system to work with basically any EFI vehicle back in the day. But he had an opportunity with Modern Motor Magazine to build a Ford XF Falcon that they attached a supercharger to the inline-six motor. They gave him kind of a rundown that they said they needed a system that performs well without flat spots or knocking, and they had to pass the government emissions and control regulations at the time, but it had to remain fuel efficient as well as making good power. So, being kind of early on in the EFI stuff, when most guys are still tuning carbs with a screwdriver, is kind of a tall order. But yeah, that's where we started. So we were originally kind of just born of the need for an enthusiast kind of market to modify and control, make power with their fuel-injected vehicles at the time.
That's awesome. Definitely one of the most well-known names. So it's awesome to see that that name's kind of gone along from the beginning. So.
Yeah, for sure. We were actually we were the first aftermarket tuning strategy to be able to live tune your fuel maps while the engine's running.
Wow.
So for a long time with our F2 ECU, we were the only ones that did that, and it's kind of an industry standard now in the aftermarket tuning world.
That's amazing. So let's talk about the products and services that Haltech offers, because it's so much more than ECUs.
Yeah, we've grown quite a bit lately, actually, over the last several years, last few years even. Obviously, we're known for the ECUs, so we sell 3 different products in that line. We have the Nexus line, the Elite line, and the Platinum line. The Platinum has mostly been phased out now, except for the plug-and-play ECUs, which we've been selling those since 2010, I believe. They're based on old technology, but we kind of call them a matured ECU. They've been around for a while. They do all the basics and give you all the control that you would need to tune whatever car that we make them for, and with whatever power adders that you want to add. But they're kind of getting old now, starting to show their age. But they handle most anything that you want to do with them. The ECU we're probably best known for is the Elite, which if you compare the Elite that we released back in 2015 with the Elites today, they are 2 very different units. They are in the same box, they look the same, but functions that we've added, features that we've added, the amount of flexibility that's been added with all of our software updates and the new NSP software completely changed the game for that ECU. It's brought a whole new level of life into that system. The next one after that is currently the Nexus series, which we only have one ECU in that lineup right now. That's the R5. But we don't even call it an ECU. We call it a VCU, which stands for Vehicle Control Unit, because the concept behind that ECU was to be a single box that controls everything in a race car, from the taillights to the headlights.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it has built-in data logging. It has built-in diagnostics, built-in oscilloscope, transmission controls, race functions, all the I/O you would ever need, built-in widebands, and it even has a Wi-Fi module so you can control and tune the ECU wirelessly if you want.
Man.
Outside of that, we have the digital dash, our IC7, which we just released a few years ago. It's been a hot item ever since. I think we currently have like 180 of them on back order right now because we just can't build them fast enough for everybody.
Wow.
The beauty of that dash is that you can use it with, it doesn't have to be used with Haltech. You can use it on a standard OBD2 capable car. You can wire it directly to sensors on your engine. If you don't have any kind of EFI, say you have a carburetor, you can wire directly to oil pressure, fuel pressure, coolant temp, air temp sensors, and just have the dash in a standalone function.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's also compatible with other ECUs besides Haltech. So it also works with Link, Microtech, Motec, Max, and Cyvex. And then obviously we have all of our supporting products, our CAN devices, our plug-and-play patch harnesses. We have full engine harnesses. We have the new PD16 power distribution module, and a lot of cool merch. So,
So obviously the ECUs are pretty universal, but let's talk about vehicle specific for Mitsubishi. What products does Haltech offer?
Sure. So we have several different plug and plays for the Mitsubishi stuff. We support every make of the Evo from the 1 to the 9. We can run the Evo 10 engine, but we don't have a plug and play for it yet. We also support the first and second generation of the Eclipse with a plug and play harness and the Galant VR4. We also have a terminated engine harness for the 4G63 of like the DSM era 4G. That can be modified to support 4 to 8 injectors. It can work with the 1G cast, the 2G crank and cam position combinations, a hybrid of those two, and we also make direct plug and plays for the Kigley crank position kits as well.
Huh.
And if you're kind of good with the Mitsubishi stuff, you'll know how much of it crosses over. So you'll know that there's certain applications that have the same header connector, and you can maybe use like the Evo 8 on a 3rd gen Eclipse, or you could use our 4G harness with a few modifications and run a 6G72 if you really wanted to.
Okay. So what is the difference between the Nexus and the Elite? Like you were saying, the obviously two different systems. So why should I choose one over the other?
Well, it's kind of a tricky question now. The Nexus was designed around the R5, so that was the system there. The idea was put everything under the control of one network or one ecosystem. So the functions that came along with the Nexus and with its updates included all the body controls, all the transmission controls, and all that stuff. But now we've brought the Elite series into that kind of Nexus tuning software package. So you can do a lot of the stuff that you were built to do for the Nexus on the Elites now as well. So they're kind of backwards compatible, and that we're forwards compatible in that way. The R5, though, if you're comparing ECU to ECU, like say you compare the R5 to the Elite 2500, the R5 has a lot more I/O, so you will probably never run out of inputs. I've only seen people run out of inputs on very few occasions. It's essentially an Elite 2500 with a RAM, with a wideband 2 controller, with a PDM, with a Wi-Fi module all built into one unit. So it has all of that hardware on top of being able to do dual drive-by-wire motor control if you wanted to. You can run the entire chassis with the Nexus. So you have headlight control, turn signals, fog lights, brake lights, fuel pump control. Basically anything that you would want to do with a chassis, you can do through the Nexus. Now you can kind of integrate an Elite into doing that, but where it doesn't have an integrated PDM, you would either need to add a PDM or wire a lot of that stuff through relays, which burns up a lot of I/O really quickly.
Interesting. So I feel like I see a lot of times, on the DSM pages, people are talking about, my car isn't nearly built enough for a Haltech. So why is a Haltech beneficial even for a nearly stock car?
Well, that really depends on what you're doing with the car. But either case, I would say, yes, a Haltech can be beneficial to you. I've sold ECUs to guys at the shootout by asking them how much they've spent on rebuilding engines over the years.
Yeah.
Our diagnostics and engine protection functions, if it saves you from doing one engine rebuild, then you've saved money. And it's capable of doing that. The engine protection function is very diverse on the 1500 and the 2500. So you have 3 levels of protection. So you could set a limp mode, a warning light, and then you could have a full like engine shut off mode. If say oil pressure drops too low too quickly, you can have it just kill the engine to hopefully save everything. If you set all that stuff up right, it saves you from smoking an engine, then it's paid for itself in my mind.
Definitely.
On top of that, every modification you make to the car from stock to a 6-second quarter-mile car, you can modify and tailor the tune-up and your control of the system from day one to wherever you end up taking the car, and gives you the best and most control and most tunability out of the things. You're always getting the most out of your combination and your setup.
So we see a lot of other automotive electronics brands out there, especially providing ECUs for the DSM Evo platforms. It seems more like a personal preference of what people like, but what sets Haltech apart from these other brands, and why should people choose Haltech?
Well, this is actually one of our favorite things that we get asked whenever somebody calls in as a question. Pick Haltech. First off, if you called in and asked us that question, we're going to tell you, hey, have you called any of the other ECU manufacturers out there? Have you tried calling any of our competition, and have you gotten them on the phone and been able to have this conversation? Because we're willing to bet that if you try to call a lot of them, you're going to get stuck on a hold line for a really long time, or you're not going to get an answer.
Right.
Not to say that there aren't other people in the industry that provide good customer support at a certain level, but as far as just getting a hold of people, we have 7 offices around the world, and that gives you 20 plus hours a day of support. I mean, you may call late at night and get a hold of somebody in Australia with a funny accent, but we're still there to help you. We have several techs around the world answering emails all the time. Phone lines are always open for you to call and actually speak to somebody. We do remote sessions. So if you're having issues or struggling with something, say you can't get your car started and you've installed the Haltech for the first time, call us up. We will remote in, go through your settings with you, make sure everything looks good, and help you get the car fired up for the first time. Or if you have the car running and you're having an issue or don't understand how something works, call us up. We're more than happy to explain it to you, show you an article, show you a YouTube video, help you test it on your car through a remote session, and help walk through those things and help you figure everything out. So.
That's awesome. What does the future of Haltech look like, both the future of the company and future products and services?
So we were recently bought by Race-Winning Brands. Our owner in Australia decided he was getting ready to retire, wanted to pass the company off to someone who would take care of it and help it to grow and continue like we know it can. So a lot of people have kind of asked me like, oh, are you worried about that, or what's going to happen? Is this going to be a bad thing? And to that, I say I don't think it's going to be a bad thing at all. I actually think it's going to be a really good thing. I'm really optimistic and looking forward to the opportunities this gives us. I mean, the Race-Winning Brands company owns a lot of companies that other people probably already know and are really familiar with and that do very well. For example, they own Dart, Wiseco, Manley, K2. They own a lot of these brands that you're really familiar with. You just probably haven't really heard of Race-Winning Brands in the background of owning those companies. So I have a really optimistic view, and I think it's going to be a good thing for us in the long run. It's also nice that the company is going to be owned in the United States now.
Right.
So we may see some more U.S.-focused development and products, and hopefully we can have a bigger foothold here in the United States. I mean, we already do have a pretty good size hold as far as our company goes, but in competing with a lot of the other ECU manufacturers here, I think it's just a springboard for us to go to that next level.
Definitely. So I thought it was important to highlight, we touched on customer support, but what I get when I buy a Haltech ECU, because it's so much more than what's just in the box. Just by looking at, if anyone out there has a Haltech account, they can already see the countless downloads and everything else. So could you talk us through what I get besides just the product in the box?
Yeah, for sure. So it depends, like what you get depends on, kind of what kit you go with, what package you go with. So all of our ECUs kind of come standard with just the ECU and a quick start guide and some little goodies that come along with it. But buying a Haltech product means that you're part of the Haltech family. So you can call us at any time, whether you bought the product from us, from a dealer, from your friend, whoever, and we're going to give you the same level of care and customer support that we would anybody. If you run into us at a racetrack and you say, hey, I'm having this problem, can you come take a look at it? Absolutely. We'll be right there. Helping people out and seeing people succeed and being there for our customers is one of our top priorities. Whatever that takes, we've just recently went to Hyperfest, and a friend of ours, he doesn't have a Haltech on his car, or he didn't at the time. He had a drift Corvette, and he was coming through on the track, noticed some weirdness, pulled off, and noticed that his ECU was actually like falling out of the engine bay, and they had ripped a bunch of wires and some stuff was wrong. So there on the spot, two of my guys went over, cut out the factory ECU, repinned it, put an Elite 2500 on it, loaded a base map into it, helped him get some stuff dialed in, and sent him out on the track, and he was drifting for the rest of the weekend at the race. We've done the same thing at the shootout. So I think it was in 2019, we did 3 installs at the track in Norwalk. We put one on a S13 that was powered by an RB, and basically made our own competition because one of my techs at the time brought his S13 and made our own competition for that race. Loaded, took a plug and play kit, hooked it up to the car, loaded a base map, sent him out on the road, did a little bit of dial in. They were so excited because they took another ECU out of the car that they were having a lot of trouble with. They couldn't get the car to idle, couldn't get it to rev smoothly, couldn't get it to behave nicely during shifts. And we put the Haltech on it, and immediately they were in tears. They loved it. They were so excited that the car was running good. And it was a special story for those guys because the person that originally owned the car had passed away, and he was planning on bringing it to the shootout. So the family and the friends of the guy brought it to the shootout, kind of in remembrance of him.
Oh, wow.
So being able to take the car and get it running again for him and let them go out and actually race it and have fun and enjoy the car was a big moment for us.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of misinformation out there about you can't buy Haltech ECUs secondhand because they're locked. So I wanted to talk about buying a Haltech used and my options as far as customer support, all the downloads, and accessibility.
Yeah, that is not true. Blocking the ECUs is an option for the tuner. They have the option to go in there and take a map that they've written and lock it out, because essentially that is their intellectual property. Once they have mapped the car and they have set it up the way they want to, that is their strategy. That is their work. So if they feel the need or the want to lock that, they absolutely can. Now, that does not keep you from buying one secondhand, because say you did buy one that was locked. It's very easy to go in there and restore defaults and just start from scratch. So you're never locked out of the ECU, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
And the software that we use to tune the ECUs is all free. So you can get on the Haltech.com and go to our downloads and download whatever software package you need to tune whichever ECU you bought, absolutely free. So there's nothing restricting you from using an ECU, locked or not locked. So with the software packages, that comes with all the downloads, all the updates that you'd need. Say you did buy one that was old. Say you bought one that was built in 2015 and a lot of the features and things are not there. You're just an update away. We don't make anybody pay for updates or new features or new anything on the software package side of things. So if your ECU came and it doesn't have rally style anti-lag because it was one of the first ones that we made of that model, that the latest update has it and has transmission control and has access to the PDM and all the stuff, you're just an update away from getting all that stuff. We don't charge any extra for any of that. So
that's awesome.
Yep.
I thought it was important to note with the increasing popularity of the 6G7.5 and then also the 420A out there, those people always feel like they don't have any options. If my engine isn't listed on the Haltech website, what are my options as far as running a Haltech ECU?
Okay, so this is a really good topic as well, because just because we don't have a plug-and-play kit for your ECU, or you don't see a kit for your ECU listed on our website, it does not mean we don't support it. If you download our software, hop in there and look at all of our trigger configurations, there are over 200 different engines that we support in their factory combinations. So quite a big library of supported engines right off the bat there that we just don't advertise all of those on the website because we don't have plug-and-play kits for all of them.
Right.
But we also have the ability to use generic crank and cam trigger kits. So say you had an engine that had something weird from the factory that we don't support or we can't support, it's easy enough to go buy a flying floor magnet kit from MSD or from somebody, bolt that to the crank pulley and put a sensor on it and put a single pulse on the cam or modify the cam so it has a single pulse, and boom, you're up and running on the Haltech. So with that, custom engine geometry, custom engine configurations, custom firing orders, there's ultimately an unlimited number of engines that we could support at this point. So, yeah.
I thought it was important to tie that question in with this one about your background with Mitsubishi cars because you know, your car is kind of off the beaten path as far as Mitsubishi. So you want to tell us a little bit about your background with Mitsubishi cars?
For sure. So I actually got into the Mitsubishi scene because of WRC and seeing like the Lancer WRC and Tony Mackinnon back in the days. I used to be into dirt bikes and off-roading and stuff, so seeing what they were doing with those cars off-road and on the gravel one, that really piqued my interest. So in 2008 or 9, I had a Jeep Grand Cherokee, and I was driving pretty far for work. So I was looking for something a little more fuel friendly. I happened to find this Lancer Rally Art, a 2004 Lancer Rally Art on a car lot. I took it for a test drive, and I had to have it at that point. I was hooked from my first test drive. So I bought that car, and that was kind of the slippery slope that has led me down this torturous path to Mitsubishi's. Since that car, man, I've owned 3 of those 04, 06 Lancer Rally Arts. They are just a really unique car. I've driven all sorts of other Mitsubishis, but that one has a near and dear place to my heart. It's a fun car. It's well balanced for a front wheel drive. It's well balanced, has decent power. You know, it's really receptive to modifications, and it has just enough crossover stuff with like the Evos and the Eclipses that there's a lot of variety that you can go into with modifying those, even though they're kind of a lesser known platform. I've owned a 3rd gen Eclipse, 01 Mirage Coupe, and then my Evo 9, which has also been a bit of a struggle since I bought it. When did I buy that car? I bought it in 2015, I think. Yeah, I bought it in 2015 from a guy in Tennessee, and it's gone through 4 different engine combinations now. So I had the 63 in it when I first got it. Shortly after buying it, I had a valve seat drop, so I had to pull the engine apart to do some work on it. While I had it apart, I realized that the pistons in it were actually from an Evo 8, not an Evo 9. So I was like, that's kind of interesting. A little weird. Whatever. Threw it all back together. Not long after that, the bottom end went out in it. So I pulled that motor out, and I had a 4G69, which came out of those 04, 06 Lancer Rally Arts.
Yep.
I had the bottom end of one of those built with some manly rods and pistons, and had a unfortunate transaction with an engine builder at the time, and when I put that engine together and fired it up for the first time, it locked up the first time I went and drove it.
Jeez.
Yeah, so pulled that back out, and some of the guys that I worked with at Haltech at the time helped me build the original 63 motor, clean it all up, refreshed it, put it all back together. It was making some good power. I drove it like that for a year, 2 years maybe, and then I broke the crank in it. Which is an odd one because I didn't break it at the back of the flywheel like most people do. I broke the nose of the crank off at like the first balancer. Oddly enough, the engine still ran, and I was close enough to home when it broke and it started rattling that I was like, well, something's already badly messed up. I'm just going to keep driving and get it home. My boss at the time, he just cracked the joke. He was like, well, it's a 4G. It's probably still making 400 horsepower with a broken crank. But took that apart, debated on what to do with it for a little while. My daughter was on the way at that point, so I didn't really have a lot of time or money to be putting into building another engine for it. So I did the oddball thing and bastardized my Evo by putting a 4G69 long block in it. I went to a junkyard, found a 4th gen Eclipse that had a good engine in it, pulled it out, went through the engine, all new gaskets, seals, whatever, put it in the car. I actually put it in the car naturally aspirated, put an Outlander header on it, and modified that to the existing exhaust that I had in the Evo. Fired that thing up in a weekend at that point and got it running on the Haltech. It was already running on the Haltech, but I just modified this tune-up in it for the 69. Fired it up, and it ran great for 2 years like that. Only thing I had to do with it was build an ignition harness for the coils.
Yeah.
It's coil unplugged, those engines are. They're not a wasted spark like the 63. And I had to move the MEVEC connector from one side of the head to the other. Other than that, it was easy. It was cake. It bolted right up. So after it ran that way for a while, I stashed away some parts and some money and put a GT35 on there with a top mount. So now it's a single overhead cam, 2.4 liter GT35 powered Evo. Until that blows up, I'm just going to keep running it because it's been good fun, and I drive almost daily drive that car.
Yeah,
I drive it everywhere. So
every time you post a picture of it, I'm like, man, this thing is so crazy. It's amazing that it's sticking together.
Absolutely, it really is.
So let's talk about Haltech's goals for 2022 with the new owner. Is there anything that you guys are trying to lock down by the end of the year?
So really, I guess our plans for the rest of the year are just to kind of keep doing our thing, keep providing the best products and aftermarket support, customer support that we can. That's one of the big things that we're known for. It's one of the things we really pride ourselves on is that customer support and just being there for the customer. So we're going to kind of just focus on doing that until we can get some of like the business side of things squared away with integration with RWB. But after that, I think, that'll really set us up to do some really cool stuff in the coming years. I'm pretty excited about where we're going at that point.
Definitely. So let's talk about the events that you guys are going to be at for the rest of the year that, people can ask you questions face to face.
Yeah, for sure. It's actually a bit of a loaded question because our event calendar is close to 80 events strong for 2022.
Yeah.
Our guys are in and out of the office and at racetracks and at different events almost every weekend. It's pretty wild, actually. So some of the big ones that you probably see us at or catch us at, I got 2 guys that are out at Pikes Peak this week. We're working with Clutch Kickers to do that event down in Florida. I got the Plenty of Tarmac Rally here in Kentucky coming up in July. We have Yellow Bullet Nationals, LS Fest. Obviously, we'll be at the Shootout. We'll be at FL2K, No Mercy, World Cup Finals, PRI. So most of the big events around the country you can find us at.
Awesome. So we let some people on social media ask you some questions directly that we can talk about on the podcast. Honestly, I maybe get one every time I ask this, but people were full of questions for you. So if you don't mind, we'll go through them.
Absolutely.
So first, I think we already answered it, but is it Haltech or Haltech? Obviously, very disputed on the internet.
Yeah, it is. It's actually fun. The Australians get really tore up when you call it Haltech. So it is Haltech. It's actually a reference to HAL 9000 from 2001's A Space Odyssey.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so we actually made a joke about this, and I think it was a Valentine's Day skit that the marketing team did, where I think Dave gets trapped in a car, and the car becomes sentient and starts talking to him and tells him how much he loves him and everything. Yeah, it's actually a reference to the HAL 9000, so it is Haltech.
Good to know. So everybody listening out there, there's no more excuses.
Exactly.
So some people were wanting to know the basics and difficulties to setting up a standalone to work on a less supported platform. Like we were talking about earlier, the 6G75 is becoming super popular now. The 420A is still kind of feeling unloved. So What's your advice for those people?
So I'll take this back to the Lancer Rally Art that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
It's a lesser known platform. When I joined Haltech back in 2016, one of the first things that I did was like get support for that chassis, or for that engine. I mean, so there's ways you can go about it. You could either modify the crank and the cam with something that we already support, or you can send us some information and we can get that those trigger types built into the software. I've done that on numerous occasions to have things like the 4G69, or I did a Goldwing GL 1800 a while back, and I think some side-by-sides and some just different vehicles that I've added over the years. By sending us that information and like an oscilloscope trace of what the triggers look like and some pictures of them and things like that. Even with the 6G75, we've gone back and forth on those and support. And oddly enough, there's like two different types. There's like one that they use in Australia, and there's one that we use here in the US, and there's some different combinations that they use depending on whether it's a car or an SUV or whatever it is. So we've actually gone back and forth on getting that stuff figured out as well. But probably the first thing you got to do is figure out the wiring. If you don't have a good pinout, if you don't have a good wiring diagram, you're really shooting in the dark. So whatever you can find from factory service manuals, from pinouts for the factory ECU, any of that information is going to be a gold mine when it comes to putting a standalone in your car. At that point, with the Haltech software, it's so flexible that you can go in there and custom configure it in almost any engine. Go in there and send your firing order, the firing angles, the trigger type that you're using, configure all that stuff. And a lot of times we'll have base maps or base settings for any of the ones that we have built into the software, which is pretty extensive. Like I said, it's over 200 engine combinations that we support out of the box. But that's really the first big hurdle that you have to deal with. Getting that wired in, getting everything going, getting your starting file set up. From there, give us a call. We can work through getting everything configured and ready to fire up for you, going through the different systems and components and parts that you have on your engine. And then once you get it fired up and running, just get it off to an experienced tuner. If they're familiar with the Haltech software, they should be able to take care of you from there. So,
Definitely. So someone was asking about the best Haltech budget standalone option to go with on a Mitsubishi 4 or 6-cylinder for a newcomer who doesn't know anything about tuning their own car.
Okay. So that one's pretty simple. We used to have the Elite 550. It was a 4-injector, 4-ignition output ECU that covered all the basics that you'd need to run an engine. But we've recently discontinued that one in favor of keeping the Elite 750 on the shelf because components are getting hard to find with the economy and the way things are around the world right now. So we kind of had to narrow that down, kind of filter that down to keep parts or keep ECUs on the shelf and kind of reduce some of the duplication of designs. So the 750 is what I would recommend to anybody that has just a basic, simple setup. You have a 4 or 6-cylinder ECU engine. The 750 is designed for that. It has 6 injector outputs, 6 ignition outputs. The unused ignition or injection outputs that you have, you can reassign those as boost control outputs or solenoids for different things, or to trigger relays for lights or for fuel pumps or whatever you want to do with it. They're flexible in that way. Then you obviously can do boost control out of the box. You have race timers and all this stuff to basically more than you would ever need on a basic, simple setup on the simplest ECU that we make. So the 750 would be the way to go there. And you have really only one option as far as wiring that ECU. Well, 2 options. You have a plug and pins kit, so you can chop off the connector for your factory ECU, pin it directly into the ECU, and get connected to the engine that way. Or we sell it with a universal flying lead harness, so you can make your own engine harness or make your own adapter harness to adapt to the factory wiring in the car.
Wow.
Making an engine harness sounds really daunting, and it is to a lot of people. But I think if you ever opened up one of our flying lead harnesses and laid it out, all of our wiring colors are documented really well. We bundle the wires up in a way so it's like, hey, here's all my injectors, here's all my ignitions, here's what I need for my crank and my cam position sensor, here's my air temp sensor, my coolant temp sensor. So you kind of know where everything needs to go and what bundles of wire go where. At that point, you can kind of just lay it over the engine, cut it to size, put on your factory connectors, either crimp them on or repin them to go directly into the connector. loom the thing up, and you're ready to go.
That's amazing. So yeah, everybody out there with the 6G75 who you think that you gotta custom make some kind of Honda ECU work, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, we support the 6G75, we support the 420A, we support the 4G64, the 63, the 69, even the smaller ones that came in the Mirage, we support those as well. So yeah, we get for the Mitsubishi stuff, we cover about all of it.
Awesome. So even though this is a hypothetical question, I guess it's also realistic since you have your own Haltech powered car. But if you had to choose the best standalone for your own personal project, which one are you going with and why?
Well, actually, I have multiple. So my Evo has a Elite 2500 in it. I chose it because with the car never came with cruise control. This is one of the big reasons that I chose the 2500. The car never came with cruise control. And with the 2500, you can do drive-by-wire. So what I did, even when I had the 63, I retrofitted a 4th Gen Eclipse drive-by-wire throttle body onto the manifold, which is just a bolt-on process. Discussed this with Evo Dan and a few other people. The Mitsubishi 4G and 6G throttle bodies, they all match up. The only thing you really got to watch out for is kind of the porting on the flange. So if you port that out a little bit to match whatever throttle body you stick on there, you're golden. So I converted my Evo to drive-by-wire using the throttle body out of a 4th Gen Eclipse and the pedal out of one as well. And that gives me access to have cruise control, which is what I was really after because that car never came with cruise control, and I drive my car a lot. So that was a big motivator for me in that sense. The 1500 would have done the same, but working for Haltech, I was like, I'll just take the one that gives me the extra outputs, and I've been able to kind of play with a lot of extra stuff. I'm kind of person, whenever I sell an ECU to somebody, try to convince them to buy more than what they think they need at the time, because you always end up wanting it later.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Kind of a buy once, cry once type of situation. Same thing in my wife has a 1990 Mazda Miata. I put a 2500 in that as well. It is the most underutilized 2500 in the world because it only has 2 injector outputs and 2 ignition outputs and a 2-wire auto control motor and crank and cam position. But yeah, so the 2500 is just the best kind of middle ground ECU for all the stuff that we offer. There's not much out there that ECU can't handle. So.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So I know you already answered this earlier, but let's say that I have DSM Link or I have stock ECU. Can I still run the cool Haltech digital display?
Yes, actually.
Or digital
like
dash,
I mentioned earlier, you have the standalone mode that you can use with the ECU or with the dash. So it won't integrate directly to the ECU because that ECU doesn't support CAN, and the OBD2 protocol is pretty old. But we sell a blind lead harness or a semi-terminated harness for that dash. So you can put that dash in the car, run the pre-terminated harness out into the engine bay, plug in your coolant temp, your air temp, your map sensor, get fuel level from the tank, wire up your oil pressure sensor, your fuel pressure sensor, all that stuff directly to the dash. You can see all that information, even though you're not running a Haltech ECU.
That's awesome. Well, finally, Josh, I always give people an opportunity to give a shout out to anybody who helped them get where they are or help their company get along. Is there anybody you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, for sure. So my wife and my daughter, Christine and Willow, I have to travel a lot for work. Obviously, I mentioned going to races all the time and traveling around. They put up with me being away with all that, and then also with me tinkering on every car that we buy. So every car we own is modified in some way because I just can't leave things alone. But yeah, they always put up with that, and they're always there for me. And they actually just went with me to Grid Life, and we had a great time. Willow loves the race cars. My wife got out on the course with my buddy Andrew in his drift car, and she absolutely loves being in the cars and being around the racing community. So I'm really grateful to have people at home that support what I do.
Definitely.
Also want to give a shout out to an old buddy of mine, Brent Fortin. He runs a shop up in Canada called Exclusive Tuning. Man, if it wasn't for Brent back in my rally art days, I don't know if I ever would have gotten into tuning and standalone engine management and modifying the electrical side of things as much as I have. He helped me back in the day get my Rally Art tuned. There wasn't really a good way to tune those things back in the day, not with the factory ECU. Me, him, some guy in Australia that goes by the name Merlin. If you're all on Evo M, you've probably seen some posts from Merlin, like the how to tune the Evo 8 and 9 stock ECUs. He has a guide on there about doing all that stuff. The three of us worked together to create a way to tune the ECU in the 4G69 back in the day and test it out and everything. If it wasn't for Brent, I would have never gotten into this stuff and been here today.
Awesome.
And then, of course, I'd like to give a shout out to my boss, Eric Gash. He's the VP of Motorsports at Haltech. He took a chance on me when I was at the top of Mount Stupid. I thought I knew what I was talking about, but I still had a lot to learn. And I was just a local guy that just happened to know some people and found out that Haltech was hiring and applied. And he took a chance on me and hired me. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here either. So
awesome, man.
And then obviously just a lot of my friends from the community. Aaron Gregory, Chris Johnson, Tom and Adriana Noonan, Tony Niemczyk, Mike Waller, Devin Schultz, Andrew Welling, just all these guys, the people that you kind of network with and around, like they really make it for you. Like when you go to a race and they're just hospitable, they invite you over to hang out and have food and tinker on the cars and whatever. Like having friends and family like that at events is what it's all about.
Definitely. I agree.
I've always said that the shootout is more of a family reunion than it is a race to me.
Right. It's a family reunion that just happens to have some racing at it.
Yeah, exactly. I actually wrote an article for Haltech. It's on the old website. It's 5 or 6 years old now, but I went to the shootout and had to write an article to kind of recap the event. That's like one of the first lines I used in it. I was like, yeah, it's a race, but it's more of a family reunion. You get to be around all your friends and family, and there's more camaraderie than there is competition.
Right.
Everybody wants to see everybody do well. So.
And I love the, nobody goes there to run their car down the track half-ass. It's going to be,
exactly.
We're all going to drive across the country and we're going to go for a Hail Mary.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's, it's one of my favorite events that I go to throughout the year, that and probably World Cup. There's so many people in the racing industry that are just such good people, and getting to work with those guys, and not to mention all the guys that I work with at Haltech. Like when you work somewhere, the people you work with make or break your experience at the job, right? Like I've worked with some really cool people. I've learned a lot from all the guys I work with. If it wasn't for going to work and getting to be around these guys and experience the things that we do, I don't know how long I would have stuck with this, but they make the job what it is.
Awesome.
The people, the customers make the job what it is, and I absolutely love it. Wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, I'm glad that you got around those right people and that you stuck around, because you've definitely made an impact, definitely to the DSM world for sure. Or I should say Mitsubishi Performance world. By making sure making sure the products get out there and people know that they have an option.
Yeah, for sure. That's like I said, Mitsubishi stuff has always been my bread and butter and where my heart is. So I've always gone, above and beyond to help out all my Mitsubishi fam. So
awesome. Well, Josh, I want to make sure that I say thank you. If it wasn't for you, I don't think Haltech would come on as a site sponsor. It's amazing to be able to work with such a world-class company to have Haltech as a sponsor on the website. It means a lot to me, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All right, Joshua, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure you're a busy man. You probably got 15 phone calls on hold, so I won't keep you up any longer.
All right, thanks, man. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the MitsuTimes podcast. Check out our Instagram and Facebook for daily updates. Get added to our list by going to MitsuTimes.org and clicking Submit a Slip. Thank you to all of our sponsors.